Welcome to Hebrew Words in Scripture. This is Lesson 59. Let's look at the name Simeon, who is the second son of Jacob. And let's look at a few other words like Laban and Leah. So let's jump right into it. Remember that Jacob got in trouble with his brother on the birthright, had to leave home, traveled 400 miles to Haran to find his mother's brother, Laban, his uncle, fell in love with Rachel, Laban's daughter, his cousin, and worked 7 years to marry her. He got a little bit tricked by Uncle Laban, substituted his oldest daughter, Leah, for the wedding instead of Rachel, who Jacob expected. So Jacob worked another 7 years and married Rachel and then began having children. And we pick up here where Leah conceived and bare a son. She called his name Reuben. We've already looked at Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn. And in verse 33 we see, "And she conceived again and bare a son and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also." And she called his name Simeon. And we're going to look at the word Simeon. But notice that Simeon is H8095, but just a few lines before it, the word heard is H8085. We've seen this pattern before. Looking at H8095 for the name Simeon, we see Shin, Mem, Ein, Vav, Nun, Simeon. And we see the name means heard. And if we see its origin is from 8085, and looking at H8085 for the English word heard, we see Shin, Mem, Ein, which are the first three letters of Simeon in Hebrew. And so we see this word means heard or to hear. And this is a very common connection where in the Hebrew language where a name is repeated in an action or a circumstance involving the naming of that person. And going back in time a little bit, a few verses ahead, remember Jacob had worked for 7 years. He thought for Rachel, and the wedding night took place, or the wedding feast took place, and the wedding night took place. And on Genesis 29, verse 25, it says, "And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore hast thou beguiled me?" Verse 26, and Laban says, "It must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." And Laban makes a new contract in verse 27, "Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years." Verse 28, and Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. So apparently there's 14 years here that there have been no children born, and Leah gave the firstborn Reuben after both of the daughters had been married. We see the Hebrew word for Leah is H3812, and we see that's Lamed Aleph Hey La Leah, and it means weary. The scripture says tender-eyed, and we really don't know what this means. No one has an adequate explanation. Suffice it to say that she wasn't the beauty that Rachel was, which led to familial conflict. Looking for the word Laban in Hebrew, we see it's H3837, and H3837, Lamed Bet Nun, Laban, and it has the meaning white. We see the origin is from H3836, which also means white. And so what does this mean? I'm not sure, except it had something to do with white. And I'm reading in another part of the Bible in 1 Kings chapter 7 about when Solomon is building the temple. And in 1 Kings chapter 7 verse 1 it says, "But Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon." Now, that was a curious word, and so I wanted to look up the word Lebanon. And we see the word Lebanon appears as H3844, and H3844 is Lamed Bet Nun Vav Nun Lebanon, Lebanon. And so we see the Lamed Bet Nun is exactly the same as the Lamed Ben Nun in the word Laban. And it says it's whiteness. It's a wooded mountain range on the northern border of Israel, and I looked it up. These mountains are over 5,000 feet tall, and so oftentimes have snow on the top, therefore white.